Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly by Councillor Anouk Clopert. Anouk, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. I've had a busy day, but delighted to be here. Thanks
Excellent, we're delighted to have you. And on the other side we have former SNP MP Stephen Gethins. Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me along.
Great, and potential future MP as well, we should probably say. Now, we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 732,500 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 707,491 were confirmed negative, 25,009 were positive. There were 383 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly, one new reported death. This will, of course, be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will necessarily show symptoms and not everyone will necessarily get tested. We do urge you, as always, if you're showing any symptoms like a dry, persistent cough, a temperature, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, you do please book a test as quickly as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 73 people in hospital last night, 10 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,506. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,825 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 37 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And as it's Tuesday, we also have the Office for National Statistics report on deaths registered in week 37, which was the week ending the 11th of September. This shows a total of 99 deaths involving COVID-19 in England and Wales for that week. This is an increase of 21 from the previous week, although this may in part be related to the August bank holiday, which would have delayed the registration on some deaths in the previous week. The UK daily tally for the week was 77 deaths, although 3 of those were in Scotland. Deaths in hospital were below the 5-year average, as they have been for much of the pandemic period. This is largely down to fewer people being in hospital due to reduced capacity in the NHS during the pandemic. This was more than counterbalanced, though, by deaths at home and in care homes, which both rose again. Overall, total deaths from all causes in England and Wales were 5.4% above the 5-year average, although deaths linked to COVID-19 were only 1% of all deaths. Again, some of that excess for the week may be due to delayed registrations from the previous week. And before we go on to the rest of today's news, if you would like to join the conversation, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. That's hashtag Scotland80 and the number 7. And we will be bringing some of those tweets up on the screen throughout the show. But our first story today, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon today announced a series of new restrictions across the country following a significant rise in new COVID-19 infections over recent days. A ban on meeting in homes has been extended from the Greater Glasgow area to the whole of Scotland, meaning adults out with an extended household should not meet in each other's homes. This will become illegal as of Friday, but the First Minister has asked people to comply as of tomorrow. Also from Friday, pubs will be required to close at 10 p.m. The First Minister reiterated that people should continue to work from home if at all possible, and also announced financial support of £500 for people on low incomes who are required to self-isolate. She also said a so-called circuit break around the October week school holiday was not currently planned, but she said people should avoid booking international travel for the week and suggested that the school break provided an opportunity to further reduce social contact for a time, which could help to reduce the spread of the virus. In her statement to Parliament today, the First Minister stressed that the new restrictions should not be considered a return to lockdown, but rather as an attempt to avoid a second lockdown, and that the situation would be reviewed in 3 weeks. She also said it was possible that tightened restrictions could be in place for longer if necessary, but she was hopeful that if citizens took the problem seriously and maintained a sense of solidarity and collective effort, restrictions could be loosened again more quickly. So, Stephen, I think I'd like to come to you first on this. The First Minister was kind of drawing a slight contrast there with what Boris Johnson was saying today. He was saying, 6 months is likely for these restrictions unless people do what they're meant to do. And he's also talked more about kind of punishment for not sticking to the rules, whereas the First Minister is more appealing to people's better natures. Which do you think is a more effective way of getting people to do what they're meant to do?
I think there's very clear evidence that from day one, the First Minister has been much more effective, not only getting the message across clearly, but also in some of the rules that we're asking people to do. Because remember, this is hard for people. It's hard for everybody. If you think about young people who are struggling with their education, if you think about older people who might be affected by the virus and are having to self-isolate, this is hard. So I think the First Minister's right. Let's not punish people. Let's try and bring them along. And also you've got the UK government backtracking a bit today. It's backtracking on areas like whether or not you should work from home, whereas the First Minister has always been quite clear, work from home if you can. So I think on that clarity of message and that continuity of message, I think the First Minister has been much more effective, not just today and over the past couple of weeks, but throughout this unfortunate period.
Mm. And Anouk, obviously we have seen quite significant rises in cases as we've seen the restrictions loosened over the last month or two. Do you think perhaps we lifted some of those restrictions too soon, or do you think this was almost inevitable once kids went back to school and some of the economy did start to restart?
Yeah, I think we've had to perhaps get back, because there was some pressure as well from an economic point of view that that we should return to some kind of normality. I think, however, that it was to be expected as well when the schools were going back and people were going back into the offices as well, starting to socialize perhaps in the town center for their lunch breaks, etc., etc. But this is just very difficult to avoid. So I think it's good timing now that we're hoping to get a little bit of the flattening of the curve a bit that we're seeing at the moment with today's new rules as our First Minister has proposed. So
And
I
from
think it's in good time.
Sorry, from your experience, do you think people are responding well to this? Do you think the majority of people will accept these new regulations and stick to them, or do you get the feeling that people are starting to get a wee bit stir crazy with the restrictions that they have?
I think when talking from Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City, there are definitely some signs that people would become a little bit stir crazy. But overall, I feel around here that people are very supportive and will do it if it's in if it's possible for them to do so, to try to help and protect others as well. So I think I think people will comply with it.
And Stephen, much the same question to you. In your experience, have people been getting increasingly frustrated with this? Are you hearing more people saying, actually there aren't that many people in hospital, there aren't that many people dying anymore, it's not that big a deal, and the government is just kind of going overboard?
No, I think that's a minority view. I have to say, I've been really impressed by the way that people overall have reacted to this, that overwhelmingly people are sticking to the rules. People get the seriousness of the situation that we're in. And I've been impressed. I've been really impressed by the way that people have reacted to this in terms of their workplace, in terms of students at school and university and teachers, not to mention NHS staff who've just been astonishing throughout this. So I think overall the population gets it. People get the seriousness of the situation that we're in. And I think people have responded admirably to what is an extraordinarily difficult set of circumstances for everyone. And as you say, Kerry, and Anouk's touched upon as well, one that looks likely to continue over the next few months as we go into what will be a very difficult winter.
Well, yeah, I was just about to ask that. As we get into winter, obviously it gets harder for people to socialise outside, as they have been quite a bit over the summer.
Yeah.
And we're also, looking at Christmas and, the potential for people maybe not being able to spend time so much with their families. Do you expect that people can keep going if restrictions do stay in place for a much longer time?
I hope so. I mean, one thing that we have to do is, within the rules, I hope that folk could be checking in with your neighbours, checking in with family. Some people, I think for those people who live on their own, this will be a particularly difficult time. So let's stay in touch with each other, talk to friends and family, stay in touch, be kind. And as Nicola was saying today, keep smiling. It's not easy, but we've all got to try and somehow get through this. And I think a really important point for us all to remember is, yes, we're all in the same situation, but I heard a really good analogy recently, which is we're all in the same storm, but everybody's in a different boat, and some people are in a more difficult situation than others. So we should always think about other people and how those in more difficult circumstances are going to get through the next few months.
Yeah, we should just emphasize for people who are on their own that the extended household rules do mean that you can still visit your extended household even with these new restrictions in place. We are obviously working to protect those people who are maybe at risk of loneliness and other problems that could affect people who are living alone. Okay. Are we going to be okay? Okay, sorry. I'm just being told that the First Minister is making a statement at about 8:20. So we won't be covering that, but you might want to keep an eye on that if you're wanting to hear more about this. It's going to be live on another broadcaster, not ours. You can probably guess which one. But we do move on now. The UK economy.
Watch it anyway.
The UK economy could stay in recession until at least next spring, economists have warned, as new restrictions reduce the ability of businesses to recover from lockdown in the spring and summer. Analysts from Bank of America said growth in GDP would probably stall in the fourth quarter and the first 3 months of 2021. Robert Wood, the chief UK economist at the bank, said, "We struggle to see how the economy can grow in the fourth quarter with escalating lockdown measures, fading stimulus and Brexit risks." The UK economy entered the deepest recession since records began after shrinking by more than in any other major nation in the second quarter. GDP fell by 20.4% after a decline of 2.2% in the first quarter. 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP is the technical definition of a recession. Growth recovered quickly after the lifting of lockdown restrictions over the summer, but analysts said the recovery would probably slow down or stop as restrictions are reintroduced and infections climb, ensuring that the country remains in recession until at least next year. 2 quarters of positive growth are required to confirm a technical exit from recession. And Stephen, obviously we know that the economy has taken a big hit, but now with the furlough scheme about to end, and we are going to talk about that in a minute, at the same time as these new restrictions come into place, there is a very real risk that the economy just gets into a really deep funk here, isn't there?
Yeah. And do you know you mentioned it in the Bank of England statement there. One thing that strikes me is there's not much you can do about a pandemic. It's devastating. And I don't think you can blame governments for it. You can blame the response. You can say things should have been done better. But I don't think you can blame them for it. Brexit, on the other hand, is an entirely man-made or government-made or a Boris-made, if you like, disaster. And it astonishes me, it just astonishes me why you wouldn't want to get an extension onto that, given that it looks like we're going to crash out without a deal. I know we're going to talk about this later on, but it still astonishes me about that self-inflicted economic devastation in the teeth of a pandemic is something that is grossly irresponsible. And I can't think of another government taking such a grossly irresponsible and voluntary, this is all entirely voluntary and it can all be avoided, move when everybody's facing this kind of crisis. It's a health crisis and it's an economic crisis as well. And I'm still astonished. I know we shouldn't be surprised, but I'm still astonished that you get this level of irresponsibility being willingly carried out by a government at Westminster.
Mm. And Anouk, we mentioned a wee bit earlier there the restrictions that were in place in Aberdeen for a while, and we saw how difficult that was for hospitality businesses in the city. Yeah. Many who, in fairness, kind of handled it very positively, but it's still going to be very difficult while there are increased restrictions in places for all kinds of businesses to recover, isn't it?
Yes, totally agree. It was just actually what I was writing down, and I thought Stephen had some really good analysis of the situation there. It's going to be extremely difficult for town centre businesses to recover or even just to survive when we're not when we're not in our offices, when we're not working in town, when we're basically as advised to stay at home. I find it really difficult to kind of see what the future is of the town centre businesses. Also, I think this is not so much related to the town centre, but aviation is something as well that will be very much will be suffering with. I was recently made aware, for instance, that KLM is going to be, and BA and all these airliners are going to let go of their staff in their thousands, 10,000s. All this will affect just local economies very, very much. And I really struggled to kind of find a way to kind of think, well, how can we actually support our own communities in this? I am gravely concerned.
Yeah. Well, we were just going to move on and talk about some of the financial support that exists. The SNP has warned Boris Johnson against dangerous mixed messages on coronavirus public health guidance as tighter measures are introduced across the four nations. Responding to the Prime Minister's statement today, Ian Blackford said the Tory government must perform an urgent U-turn on plans to axe the furlough scheme next month, warning it would be unconscionable to put thousands of jobs at risk during a second wave of the virus. The SNP's Westminster leader said it was vital that there was clear public health guidance, with concerns over conflicting and inconsistent UK government messages on encouraging millions of people to go back to the office prematurely. The latest ONS labour force survey revealed UK unemployment has risen to 4.1%, and the number of workers in employment has fallen by almost 700,000 since March. Separately, analysis from the Scottish Government shows extending the furlough scheme by 8 months could save around 61,000 jobs in Scotland. And Stephen, we have been talking about this on the show for months. It's been a constant drumbeat from the SNP for months. This arbitrary decision to end the furlough scheme in October, no questions, no compromise on this from the UK government. It does seem kind of baffling to withdraw that support and essentially starve people back to work when the government is also saying, actually, you're not allowed to go back to work, isn't it?
It defies belief, especially if you look at the way in which other European countries are operating, the extension that the Germans have had, for example. That's really important. Nushka raised a really, really good point there. It's especially important for small businesses. Now, small businesses were hit particularly hard by Brexit, but they're also being hit hard by the pandemic as well, and they need the support. They don't have tens of millions of pounds to to fall back on. And these small businesses are the real lifeblood to our town centres. A really good point that Anushka raised there, because we need to think about our town centres and allowing them to thrive is something that the Scottish Government's worked really hard on with a small business bonus, with town centre regeneration measures. And this could be devastating for them. Our town centres supply the lifeblood to the communities that they serve, and have really, really, really struggled. So they need that furlough scheme more than many other businesses do. And we need to keep these small shops and other small businesses going over the next wee while. Small businesses make up a huge proportion of the number of people who are employed overall. They're drivers of the economy at a local level as well. They're really important. Places like Crieff, Kinross, Cooper, places like that, they're so important in terms of driving recovery and for a thriving local community as well. So Ian Blackford is absolutely right, and he needs to keep pushing on this one, because this is one that could be a matter of survival or otherwise for a lot of small businesses out there.
Yeah, Anouk, Boris Johnson, when he announced these new measures today, some people thought that there might be some announcement about additional support for businesses and workers, but it doesn't seem that there has been anything. Do you have any idea why the UK government is so determined not to extend that support?
I just think that is to do with that they want the economy to be self-sufficient, and that's kind of part of the whole Brexit idea that people should be forced to kind of do the work here, and that we can't depend on any outside measures there. I think it's just an ideology to do maybe with Cummings and his kind of very dangerous ideas.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Sorry, Stephen, were you want to come in there?
No, look, Anouk's right there. I begin to fear that this is ideologically driven, that when you see other European governments doing this, in the same way that Brexit is driven by dogma, it's not driven by economic sense or for the good of small businesses. And this stuff's dangerous. And when we come out of this at the other end, we need to be able to build on something. And I fear that the more damage you see from Westminster, the less there is to build on at the other end. But it's why it's so important for those small businesses to get the support that they need, because they'll be the ones who are driving the recovery of our local communities at the other end of this.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Brexit there, and we do come on to that now. Germany's Europe Minister, Michael Roth, today urged the UK to drop plans for the Internal Market Bill, which would break the country's obligations to the EU under its withdrawal treaty, as time was running out to clinch a trade deal. Speaking to reporters ahead of a meeting of EU ministers in Brussels that is to prepare a summit of EU leaders later this week, Roth said he was extremely worried by plans to pass the bill that would break international law and undermine the withdrawal agreement already agreed between the EU and the UK.
Yeah.
Please, dear friends in London, stop the games. Time is running out. What we really need is a fair basis for further negotiations, and we are ready for that, Roth said. Meanwhile, Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said the UK was sending out conflicting messages with its actions. There is a growing sense that perhaps the United Kingdom does not want a deal and that it is more about managing the blame game as negotiations fail, Coveney said. People have been very taken aback by the deliberate strategy coming from the British government. This is very damaging to Britain's reputation outside the bubble of Brexit discussions. And I am just hearing in my ear that the Internal Market Bill has passed. There was a vote going on in Parliament this evening, and I believe that's just passed. But coming to you first then on this, Anouk. This idea that the UK is just playing games, what do you make of that? Do you think the UK is actually determined to get a deal, or do you think this idea from Simon Coveney that it's perhaps about just setting up who to blame when there isn't a deal is actually what's going on?
Yeah, I think it might be just the last option, actually. I I don't know too much about it at this moment in time. So, but it sounds to me that they just don't want to get, they just want to be able to blame some other kind of entity. So, yeah.
Hmm. And Stephen, of course, this was part of your remit when you were an MP. What's been your take on how this particular aspect of the Brexit saga has unfolded with the internal market bill?
Well, pretty much as chaotically as the rest of the Brexit saga unfolded. I still wake up screaming in the night, remembering sort of 4 years of my life that I'll never see again as a result of Brexit. But let's not forget something. Let's not forget something, and this goes to the heart of the chaos that's been there from the very start. Boris Johnson forced an election over his version of the deal. He told us it was oven ready. He won the election down in England on that bill. He even forced Tory candidates to sign a pledge that they'd vote for his deal. Then they passed it before Christmas. And then after Christmas, they decided actually it wasn't that good a deal anymore. And they said it had been rushed. And you'd accept that excuse were it not for the fact that we'd put down an amendment saying this is rushed. Why not give us some more time, which they voted against. So a lot of Tory MPs must be feeling pretty daft at the moment. But actually, this is not about whether or not Tory MPs feel daft. This is about folks' livelihoods. And you forget that this Brexit is about, will make food and drink more expensive, energy more expensive, and put people out of work. Now, that's not just me saying that. That's the government's own analysis. Now, when I was Europe spokesperson, a small number of us were allowed to go to the Treasury, look at the figures, because we'd being able, for an amendment I put down with a couple of other colleagues, we were able to force that we could see that economic analysis. So this isn't just me saying it. It's not a university saying it. It's the government itself saying it. We know the damage. They know the damage this will cause. And it's no longer a political debate, but in the teeth of a recession, they know food prices will go up, energy prices will go up, and people will lose their jobs. That's irresponsible. It's not negligence, because they know. Negligence is where you don't, you might not know, or you don't care. They know the damage that this is going to cause. And I'm astonished every day by this. But this is something that will be devastating. And I want to talk, and I know, sorry, you'll get me going now. On that point alone is awful. And then there's the point of international law, which I'm happy to talk about in a moment, and what that does to the UK's reputation, and to Scotland as a member of the UK while we're still in that United Kingdom, is something that even Theresa May was balking at.
Yeah. Well, before we mention the question of international law, I wanted just to tie this back into COVID a little bit, because people have talked obviously about the combined impact of the two problems. Do you think there is a sense that the UK government is almost using COVID as a cloak under which to hide the chaos that Brexit is going to cause? And that people will tend to think, well, things are bad because of COVID, so it's not all Brexit's fault.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I do not see any other reason why you drive the Brexit truck over the cliff edge when you're in the middle of a COVID crisis. I just don't see it. And you sense the frustration from everybody. And you sense the frustration from other European countries who are looking on in absolute horror at what's unfolding in the United Kingdom. And I have to say that you can disagree, and I had my very strong, I was in Parliament when Theresa May was Prime Minister, when David Cameron was Prime Minister. You have your very, very, very strong disagreements. I don't think any of those two are as dangerous as Boris Johnson is. And it's not just dangerous to politics in the UK, this is to our livelihoods, to our very livelihoods, and people who might be struggling, some of the most vulnerable in society, and their well-being is being damaged. I mean, look, just before this pandemic, the European Medicines Agency, 200 really good jobs down in London, left, up sticks and left. It went to Amsterdam. Now, we're not blaming the Dutch for coming in and trying to get that medicines agency and all the benefits that brings. But can you imagine turning your back on that kind of cooperation at this time when everything that the government does, and you see the stress and strain on ministers, is a matter of life and death. And sometimes it just beggars belief. And I've got no idea why they're doing this, other than pure dogma, utter dogma. They got this wrong. There was no plan for Brexit, and we'll all pay the price.
And just quite quickly, Stephen, on that point of the breaking of international law, what effect do you think that is going to have on the UK in the sort of medium to longer term?
It's horrendous. It's already horrendous. So look, trust. If you and I, Kenny, are sitting here making an agreement, what drives that agreement? That agreement is driven by whether or not we trust each other and if we get a good deal. Now, if you and I had made an agreement and then I break that agreement, but then I come round to you and say, can we redo it again? You're going to be a little bit wary and you're going to want checks and balances. So the UK's soft power, and soft power is really important. I think it's more important than military power because it's how you're perceived in the world when you're trying to make trade deals, have political clout for your values, to get your values across. And if that's hit, that takes decades to build up, And you already see how much that the UK's brand has been damaged in the United States, elsewhere in Europe, elsewhere around the world, that you've got a UK government that says we will break international law. And let's not forget about the impact that this has on some of the most vulnerable in society. And I know we're going to discuss China in a moment. But one thing when, if you like, the European Union tries to pull together is we should stand up for people who are vulnerable and who are having their rights. We should stand up for human rights elsewhere in the world. But then you hear, if the UK tells China, you need to stand up for human rights, you need to stand up for international law and the rules-based system, you undermine your own argument because you've turned around and said, well, we can break international law with impunity. And that's a really dangerous message to be getting across to the rest of the world. And look, I believe in independence. I believe that Scotland should be an independent country. But while we're part of the Union, I'd like to see, and I've argued, that the UK should try and stand up and be a force for good in terms of human rights, working with their European partners to stand up for the most vulnerable in society. And the UK has weakened its hand in doing that. And I think that's sad.
Well, we do move on to another aspect of Brexit, and the port of Dover is not Brexit ready because it is still waiting for government funds to be released for vital infrastructure for the new border operations, according to a senior port official. It comes as news emerged that the government was considering requiring drivers to obtain a special Brexit passport before entering Kent in a bid to avert queuing chaos in January. Tim Reardon, the head of the EU exit at the port, said the government was cutting it quite tight, with just 100 days to go before Brexit is fully implemented on the 1st of January. The government has a funding scheme which is due to open for application later this month. Clearly that's cutting it quite tight for stuff to be actually delivered and in place when significant civil works are involved by early next year, he told MPs on the Treasury Select Committee this morning. The money needed to be issued rather than talked about, he said. And Anouk, it's kind of extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, we had not all that long ago UK ministers saying they didn't realise how important the Dover to Calais crossing was for trade. And now with just 100 days to go, the Port of Dover is still waiting on the money it needs to build the infrastructure to cope. I mean, even if it had the money now, it would be difficult to get everything done in time. Why do you think this has just been so badly organised? Is this just rank government incompetence?
Yes, I think it is just rank government incompetence. I mean, there is just absolutely, this is a vital point in our infrastructure to get all the, I'm thinking of all the fresh foods that will go to our nearest market in Europe. They are totally dependent on this crossing. I cannot imagine the reason other than this incompetence, because this is just, if what are our businesses going to do if they cannot get their goods on the other side in a certain time limit. This is absolutely an absolute disaster for many of our food producing businesses all over the UK. But thinking of Scotland, you know, this is just an absolute disaster for us. Not being, you know, we don't even know exactly what is required to comply with, because it's not even set up. So this is going to be an extra very difficult hurdle to take for our food producing businesses and other businesses. Very difficult to kind of imagine that there is a reason behind it. It's just incompetence.
Yeah, and that kind of level of, or the lack of preparation that there's been, it does seem to have been a theme throughout this. We've seen, as you said, food producers complaining that they don't know how to label goods for January, and it's now too late for them to get all the things done to do that properly in time. There's lots of industry sectors still waiting on guidance. Do you foresee a real crisis, even if a deal is done before the end of the year, because people just aren't prepared to implement it? Anouk?
Yes, is that for me? Absolutely.
Sorry, yeah.
You know, this is going to be a big problem for these businesses. There, as you say, there's no guidance available at all. So yeah, this is going to be a double whammy, a triple whammy for our businesses. Yeah.
Well, we come back to coronavirus now, and Scotland needs a new strategy to rapidly build NHS testing capacity if we are to reduce the spread of coronavirus, Scottish Greens parliamentary co-leader Alison Johnson has said. Responding to the First Minister's statement this afternoon, Ms Johnson also highlighted the urgent need to improve access to mental health support and to extend employment support. Alison Johnson said the Scottish Greens have supported a precautionary approach to dealing with the pandemic throughout, and while these further restrictions will be further challenging, it's quite clear that the virus hasn't gone away, and additional action is needed to get on top of it. Months of the restrictions has taken a huge toll on the country's mental health, and the thought of months more, while necessary, will be devastating for many. It's vital that mental health support is made available to all who support it and need it. Mental health support is made available to all who need it, To suppress and ultimately eradicate COVID, we need the Scottish public to abide by these rules, but none of us should be in any doubt that it's an enormous ask of everyone across the country, young and old. Equally, the Scottish Government must step up to that challenge and move mountains to make mass testing happen in Scotland. Stephen, we did talk about this a little bit earlier, but this mental health impact on people, I was reading another report today saying that the effects of having dealt with long-term coronavirus would be equivalent to the kind of PTSD that soldiers experience in a war zone. Do you think the Greens are right to be calling on increased mental health support for people as we get deeper and deeper into this pandemic period?
I think they're right to focus on mental health. I mean, to be fair, Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government have talked about the mental health impact of this. One of the problems that we've got, of course, is like so much of dealing with this virus, nobody's ever done this before. We don't know we're only just beginning to understand the virus, and we're only just beginning to understand the impact of a lockdown. Nobody's ever done this before. None of us have ever done this before. You know, last time you had a pandemic on this sort of scale was a century ago with Spanish flu, and we're in a wholly different world at the moment. Let's not forget that I think the virus came up in December in Wuhan in China, and then by February we were dealing with it in Scotland on the other side of the world. And it's spread. So we've never dealt with this before. They're right. I think they're right to highlight the impact of mental health. The impact of lockdown, we know this has been really hard for people, really hard. And some people are in a really difficult domestic situation. Some people don't have, as I said earlier on, everybody's having to deal with this differently in different sized boats in this storm that we're all dealing with. So I do think we need to analyse and we need to look at the mental health aspects of this, because this isn't going away. It's not as if we're going to come out of this in another couple of weeks. We're going to have restrictions on an ongoing basis throughout the winter. And I think trying to help some of those people who are struggling a bit is the right thing to do. And there's a physical impact, but yet you're right, absolutely, there's a mental health impact as well. And I know the government have been doing some work on that, but that needs to be analysed on an ongoing basis as we learn more about the virus and more about people being in lockdown for a long period of time.
Well, the Greens have had a few other things to say today. The Scottish Greens have renewed their calls for the 2021 exam diet to be cancelled and replaced, telling Education Secretary John Swinney that some young people sitting exams while local lockdowns prevent others from doing so would be unfair and unacceptable. Scottish Greens education spokesman Ross Greer said, "As we head into a period of renewed restrictions, it's clear that localised lockdowns and self-isolation will be inevitable throughout the year. We simply cannot guarantee that this will be over by the time exams come around. A situation where some pupils sit exams while others in the same year are assessed by teachers would be deeply unfair. This can be avoided entirely if we cancel the 2021 exam diet now and confirm that all pupils will be graded on the work they complete throughout the year, as is international best practice. Anything else simply isn't worth the risk." And Anouk, obviously as a councillor, you're quite in touch with the education system. What do you make of this idea from the Greens that we just say now that there aren't going to be exams at the end of this year, it's going to be done on a continuous assessment, and let teachers kind of teach to that now rather than leaving them uncertain for a good chunk of the academic year?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent kind of debate to have. And I was actually having, I'm not only a counsellor, but also a parent of two secondary school age children, two sons I've got. And my oldest one is actually now, started his S5 and is doing his hires. So this was exactly what we were talking about. What's going to happen? I asked him if he was going to would be worried about possibly again being assessed continuously and not sitting an exam. And to be fair, I think although the experience in April when he was supposed to be doing his exams and that didn't happen either, that was a bit stressful at the time, but it worked out fair and very well for him. He was happy with the results based on what he had done through the year, so that worked out very well. And I think it's definitely a very good discussion to have and start looking into. I mean, I personally think that exams are very much not always suitable for for everybody to do anyway. They're very much a moment in time that can bring a lot of stress and potentially an underachievement on the day. And I think assessing through the year is potentially not a bad idea to go generally anyway. So definitely would be supporting looking into this and how we can work towards a fair result in the end for those pupils, and definitely looking, a very good discussion to have now and not wait till the last minute.
Well, good luck to your son then. But we move to the other side of the world now, and China is pushing growing numbers of Tibetan rural labourers off the land and into recently built military-style training centres where they are turned into factory workers, mirroring a programme in the western Xinjiang region that rights groups have branded coercive labour, according to a new report by news agency Reuters. Beijing has set quotas for the mass transfer of rural labourers within Tibet and to other parts of China, according to over 100 state media reports, policy documents from government bureaus in Tibet, and procurement requests released between 2016 to 2020 and reviewed by Reuters. The quota effort marks a rapid expansion of an initiative designed to provide loyal workers for Chinese industry. A notice posted to the website of Tibet's regional government website last month said over 500,000 people were trained as part of the project in the first 7 months of 2020, around 15% of the region's population. Of this total, almost 50,000 have been transferred into jobs within Tibet, and several thousand have been sent to other parts of China. Many end up in low-paid work, including textile manufacturing, construction, and agriculture. And Stephen, I mean, this is a very disturbing idea, isn't it? These kind of retraining camps for two of the groups that have been most problematic for the Chinese government, the Uyghur Muslims in the western Xinjiang, and Tibet, which has been a real problem for China for a long, long time, or rather, China has been a real problem for Tibet for a long time. What do you make of this story coming out now?
I think it's really worrying. I think, first of all, can I say, I think it's really good that you guys are covering it. I think this is an important story and we need to be talking about this. China's record on human rights is appalling. China's record on minority rights, and it's got lots of minority communities, Tibetans, the Uyghurs, both of whom are in one in the northwest and the southwest of China, is dreadful. And when the Chinese authorities disregard human rights, disregard minority rights, it should be for the rest of the world to stand up to China on this and stand up for those rights. I think we have a responsibility that if somebody's rights are being abused in another part of the world, then those of us who've got human rights should be standing up for them. And I think we should. It's the universality of our human rights and our common humanity demands that. On China, one thing that does worry me is I'd love to see us working closer with our European partners. I think that brings us clout. China will listen to that. I'm not sure whether or not it listens to the UK. And as I mentioned earlier on, when you turn your back on international law, then you are weakening your position when it comes to the really important stuff, which is when you've got worrying reports about the treatment of these minorities. You're just not being listened to, and the UK government is not being listened to. And that's not just bad for anybody who lives in the UK, but it's bad news for some of the most vulnerable in society who would expect the democracies of Europe and elsewhere to be standing up for them. And I think it's something we need to talk about more, and we need to have a conversation about how we engage with China.
Well, still on China, Hong Kong has no legal basis to demand that any particular rights be extended to 12 Hong Kong natives detained in China as they tried to flee by boat, and they will have to face the law there, the city's chief executive said today. The 12 were arrested on the 23rd of August for illegal entry into mainland Chinese waters after setting off from Hong Kong in a boat bound for Taiwan, following a crackdown on pro-democracy activists in the former British colony. Their failed bid to flee to Taiwan has highlighted the fears that many people feel in semi-autonomous Hong Kong about what they see as China's determination to end any push for greater democracy in the financial hub. Chinese police have said the 12 were suspected of illegal border crossing. China's foreign ministry has called them separatists. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam was asked at her weekly news conference if she could ensure that the 12 would be afforded human rights safeguards such as presumption of innocence, fair trial and legal representation. "We do not have the legal basis to do the things that you want us to do," she said. And Anouk, this has been an ongoing thing. The Chinese brought in this new law basically suspending a lot of the rights that people in Hong Kong were supposed to be guaranteed by the handover treaty with the UK. What do you make of the way China has just chipped away at this and really cracked down on pro-democracy activists over the last months and years?
Well, yeah, I think they're just really feel that they're a law in themselves and just can do what they wish. Really, that's very clear from they're not really keeping to any much of the agreements that they've set out. I really don't know. I think Stephen probably has more to kind of say about this, but it's better to work together within with the EU than just than just the UK by itself at the moment. We really have to try to kind of reach out there, and not, while at the same time trying to do trading with Hong Kong, and then at the same time this is just happening with former UK citizens. So it's really something that we really need to really need to kind of not accept. But maybe Stephen can say something about that.
Yeah, Stephen, the UK, in theory, has a role in defending the rights of Hong Kong people against China. The one country, two systems rule was supposed to stay in place for 50 years, and it's already been more or less torn up by China. Is there anything that you think the UK could do to help there?
I think the UK's got a special responsibility, and this is something I've spoken about, and I've said that in the House of Commons to the Foreign Secretary. The UK has a special responsibility. The problem is, when you're a middle-sized state like the UK, you need to work with your partners, and the UK is not working effectively with its partners at the moment. And we also shouldn't let the Chinese off the hook on this one, is that these are human rights. And in Hong Kong, I was so impressed. You saw the bravery of a number of the young protesters who were out, who and the way they were often treated by the police. These are things that many people will take for granted: the freedom of speech, freedom to express your opinion, voting. That people in Hong Kong are worried that they're losing, and the UK has not been particularly effective in getting its message across. But yeah, the UK is ineffective internationally at the moment, and that has an impact in places like Hong Kong. But let's not let the Chinese off the hook, who are fundamentally responsible for many of these actions. And it's incredibly worrying about basic rights that many of us take for granted. And you see it today in places like Belarus, where people are out campaigning for democracy in an incredibly brave way, and they're being arrested and beaten up. And that's something that none of us should take for granted. None of us should ever take for granted, and something that we should be work hard for every single day.
And just before we go tonight, I've just been handed a report about the passing of the Internal Market Bill in the House of Commons tonight. There was a concession made by the government to some of the Tory rebels. There will now be a vote in Parliament before those treaty-breaking powers are used. Sajid Javid, who had been one of the rebels or potential rebels, has accepted that, although others, including Theresa May, apparently have not accepted that and did still vote against. So, Stephen, just quite quickly, do you think this will make a difference, having a parliamentary vote on whether or not to break a treaty?
Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. Look, if you weren't going to break a treaty, you wouldn't have said you were going to break a treaty and break international law. This is all to do with Tory internal party management, but let's not kid ourselves on. This has all been about Tory internal party management from day one. The reason we're leaving the EU, it's not because there's a good economic case or there's any other good case or they've got a plan. It's all to do with internal Tory party management. And this vote tonight has gone along exactly the same way as every other aspect of the devastation that Brexit has gone on before, which is it is all about Tory party management. And it's been sad to see so many Scottish Tories just troop in behind the rest of their party, failing to stand up for Scotland and failing to make a difference. And that's something that we're all going to pay the price for in the coming weeks and months. In fact, we already have paid the price if you look at the hit on the economy, and also critically for future opportunities for young people, opportunities that I had. And I want to leave you with this last thought, which is politics should be about, regardless of what you think, politics should be about making a world that's better and has more opportunities for those who come after us, so that Anouk's boys who are doing their exams, so that they have better opportunities than I had when I was at school and at university. But as things stand, they will have fewer opportunities than I had. And so we failed in one of the most fundamental aspects of politics in trying to make progress.
Yeah, and Anouk, I mean, obviously you're a new Scot as well. How do you think? How does this whole Brexit process? How is that? Just very quickly, how has that made you feel now to be looking at this and the chaos that you're stuck with now in Scotland?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have thought that I would have been in this place, would have been in this position 25 years. I came here to Aberdeen, and I have to say that it was a kick in the teeth in 2016 when this referendum came through. I just couldn't believe it. I've had to kind of make myself known to the authorities. Basically, I've had to do my go for the settlement, for the settled status. I had to apply for that. I've helped others applying for their settled status in disbelief. Before 2000 before I had to apply for this scheme, I wasn't known to the UK authorities as a Dutch passport holder, an EU passport holder. I was just one of the citizens, basically. And this has fundamentally changed. I don't know what's going to happen, if I'm going to in the future maybe have to pay for the NHS, for other contributions I would have to make, which are at the moment still guaranteed. And I do worry about these things very much. However, I do feel that here in Scotland, in the Scots government has made me feel very welcome and very sheltered. So I am not concerned in that respect at all. And I know how welcome we are here. So.
Well, it's a mixed feeling to end the show tonight on, but that is sadly all we have time for tonight. I'd like to thank both Anouk and Stephen very much for joining us. It has been an excellent show tonight, I think. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. The shows would be worth nothing if we didn't have an audience, so thank you for that. This is the point, though, where we do have to ask for your financial support, though. The only way Broadcasting Scotland can keep going is with financial support from our viewers. So if you are able to support us, please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month will help us to keep building a better broadcaster for Scotland. If you're not able to support us financially, we absolutely understand. The shows will always be free to view online, so you will always be able to watch. But you can still make a big difference for us. If you follow us, first of all, on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, like our page on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell icon while you're there to make sure you know when new videos go up. And then share the shows around with your friends and family. Let people know why you support Broadcasting Scotland and maybe encourage them to do it. Word of mouth is the absolute best way to spread the word about what we do, especially since we don't spend a penny on marketing right now. And finally, we are obviously looking next year at an election and potentially an independence referendum as well, which is going to require a lot more people to help us cover all that news. So wherever you are in the country, because we will need people at counts and whatnot to film and report for us. So wherever you are in Scotland, please do get in touch with us if you have any interest in getting involved in broadcasting. There's a lot to be done here, a lot for you to learn and a lot for you to contribute. So if you're interested at all in that, do please get in touch with us. We would absolutely love to hear from you. That is, though, absolutely all we have time for tonight. So once again, thank you to Stephen Gethins and to Anouk Cloppert. I'll be back again tomorrow at 7 with another Scotland at 7. But until then, have a great night. Good night.